To welcome our first guest. This speaker defends that building climate resilience needs us to account for emissions and emotions. She is going to draw our attention to the relational dimension of the climate crisis, our relationship to ourselves, to one another, and to the rest of nature. She is a global leader recognized both as an Obama Scholar and a Dalai Lama Fellow. And she is here to invite us to reimagine what building with a future in mind means. What are the values, mindsets, and attitudes that can move us at the speed and scale that we need to address climate change? I give you international speaker and president of Fila de Dole, Dr. Maia, and your keynote speaker for today. Please welcome Dr. Maia.
Boa noite, good night. I will start with something very simple. I will invite you all to take a deep breath, to pause, to bring some spaciousness, some kindness to this moment that we are spending together. You made it, you are here for the next 18 minutes or so. You have nothing to do, nowhere to be, just to be here and to receive this story that I'm telling you as a gift. I am Dr. Maia. I am a social scientist. I'm also a climate leader from the Global South. And I have been deep in this topic of climate resilience for the past 15 years. But I would say I'm part of the climate movement long before I was born. I am a descendant of climate migrants, people from the Brazilian Northeast who had to move because of drought, because of desertification. So climate resilience is here. I know a lot about it with my head, but it's also here in my body. It's part of my culture, the stories, the feelings, the songs of my family, my ancestors. I come from the Brazilian Northeast, and the Brazilian Northeast is a social climate hotspot. It's a place that is extremely vulnerable to drought, to food insecurity, to public health issues like dengue fever. Where I come from, there are huge areas like this, vulnerable to desertification. 16% of Brazil territory, which is the same as France plus Germany plus Italy plus the Netherlands in territorial size. This is the area of Brazil that is being desertified. This is what happens in my region where I come from. This is the home of more than 30 million people, 70% of the population of my country, and 85% of the poor. It's extremely hot. My body is still adapting to the weather, so I'm sorry if I have to sneeze. It's just because where I come from, it's never cold like this. There is an article from the New York Times that says that in 2020, 1% of the population of the globe were living in these areas that are extremely hot, like my state. Areas that is almost impossible to live because of the heat. But in 2027, it will be 19%. And I wonder where these people would go, where we'll go. I hope climate migration is something that is part of my past, not my future. That's why I work with climate resilience. So these are the lenses, so to speak, that I'm using to talk to you today. In my native language, the Brazilian Portuguese, when we are referring to environmental issues, we use the word socio-ambiental, social-environmental. It's a cluster of these two words, because we understand that social and environmental aspects of the climate crisis cannot be separated. They are the same. It's one thing. So my vision for building with tomorrow in mind, the vision that I'm sharing with you today, is informed by this, by who I am, by my land, my culture, my language, my ancestors. And I want to offer this moment as a healing space for you, a moment where you can just be, just listen. You don't have to worry for the next few minutes. So what is this speech is about? Building with tomorrow in mind. What I'm doing here is I'm breaking this title in 3 pieces, building with tomorrow in mind, and I will offer you my perspective in each one of these pieces. So you will see some nuances that you may not be seeing now, and this will inform your perception of the following conversations. So as you can imagine, where I come from, I can see, I can touch, I can smell, I can taste the climate crisis every day. So I would say my sense of urgency to deal with the climate crisis is above average. Yet, what I'm doing today is not talking about urgency. It's not offering an action plan, a roadmap. It's actually inviting you to slow down, to pause, and to wonder what building with tomorrow in mind even means. Let's start with building them. I am an architect and urban planner. This is the young, very, very young version of me. About 13 years ago, I used to work for the government of Teresina, Piauí. Teresina is the capital of the state of Piauí in the Brazilian Northeast. And even though I was very young, I have this simple question in the back of my mind: how our plans, our city plans, are contributing to climate resilience? Are we achieving more climate resilience in 2030? And I did some research. I found out that no, that actually considering everything that we are telling, that we are building, all the infrastructure, we are actually contributing to the climate vulnerability. But what caught my attention is that all these buildings and roads that we wanted to build were the main sources of emissions at the time. And we are still planning to build even more. So the main source of carbon emissions in Brazil, it's not the oil and gas industry, it's agribusiness. It's clearing the land to plant soy, to raise cattle. But my city is different. We don't have agribusiness, so building and the sector, the transportation sector, were the main source of emissions. It seemed like we are building with today in mind, which is understandable because a lot of cities from the global south still need to build infrastructure. And this need of building infrastructure was as real and urgent as the need of building climate resilience. So the mayor of the time, who was a visionary leader, he said, we are facing with a challenge. We need to solve the problems of the 20th century and also the problems of the 21st century. And this is the case for most of cities on the global south. So how can we move on? How can we build a resilient city? So after 10 years, I ended up being nominated as the head of the Agenda 2030 department. And I was like super excited. Now I will build my future with my hands. I was very ambitious in terms of building. I was all about building. But then 2020 happened. The pandemic hit, and I gave up on building. I just wanted to be close to nature. I didn't want to think about squares and plans and deadlines anymore. I happened to lose my father, and all I could think about was cycles, impermanence. How could I be more integrated to life? So I reconnected with the nature cycles, and I started thinking, what does building even mean? Tomorrow. So I learned when I moved to this region close to nature that tomorrow is something, it doesn't exist for everyone. And planning, as I learned, is a luxury. uncertainty does this to you. For a lot of people who live close to the poverty line, below the poverty line, this notion of planning is very distant. And I learned with indigenous leaders like Wanda Witoto that in indigenous cosmologies, the sense of past is much stronger than the sense of future. I learned, for example, with Ailton Krenak, a Brazilian indigenous leader, that the future is ancestral, that most of the solutions that we need to climate change, to sustainability, are in the past. Taken as an example, for instance, this finding from the science panel for the Amazon, showing archaeological evidence of indigenous people before European colonization, showing that these people developed entire food systems, including agroforests, very sophisticated, sustainable solutions that can inform urbanism, waste management, and a lot of our building sector nowadays. So can you imagine how many solutions are there in the past, how it would look like to build with yesterday in mind? Okay, so first I lost this obsession with building, then this drive about the future, but I still had my mind, right? Kind of, because I realized that there is more to the way we perceive the world than perceiving it with our minds. And these women here, they are the ones who taught me this. This is the first cohort of our women-led climate school in the front lines of climate change. And I learned with so many of them to pause, to meditate, to live mindfully. And also I learned with this one, Jose Medina, that our bodies are sending signs to us all the time, that if we get sick, if we feel goosebumps, if you feel pain, this is our body telling us something about how to navigate the world, how to take decisions. A couple of days ago, I was in India with the Dalai Lama Fellows. This is a network of young leaders who are inspired by the Dalai Lama legacy. And we go through a curriculum called Head, Heart, and Hands, meaning that we need to integrate our mind, our bodies, and our feelings if we want to be the next generation of leaders, if we want to be those who are actually solving all these crises. And I was there in India, and there was this monk, Tibetan monk. His name is Jesh Laktor. And I noticed that every time he was speaking about the mind, instead of pointing to his head, he would point to his heart. And we asked him, why is that? And he said, because for Buddhism, it's the same word, head and mind and heart, it's the same word. And this is our mind. This is the home of our thoughts, of our feelings, of our emotions, of so many other things that we kind of forgot about because we are living too much in our heads. So this is what I care about, emissions and emotions. And I feel like if more people care about this, like myself, we would see more solutions for building, but more solutions also for the climate crisis. We need to care about the relational aspect of the crisis. It's not only about building, it's not only about the material. The world is relational. We need to match our perception of reality to this. Our world needs us to care about ourselves, about one another, about people in the front lines of the climate crisis. For example, I come from Latin America. This is the region that kills environmentalists the most. 75% of people who were killed to protect their land, their environment, are in Latin America. And there's almost no funding for it, for their protection. Most of the funding, as you may know, go to infrastructure, goes to technology. I'm not saying that we don't need to build. Actually, we need to build. We need to keep building, especially in cities like mine, where most of people live without basic sanitation, including myself. My village has no basic sanitation, and 17% of the population in Brazil lives in areas with no basic sanitation. We need to build sustainable and affordable housing for all. Today, 1.6 billion people are homeless or living in slums like this. And with displacements due to climate change, this number will increase. Every urban construction work that leads to less car, walkable cities, services at the local level, better public spaces, all of this is welcomed. What is not welcomed is building more pipelines for oil and gas, building airports, highways. And we also need to be aware of when we think we are doing it right, for example, when we are building walls for flood protection. I'm not saying that we should not build walls. I think in some cases they are necessary. But just think about other nature-based solutions for flood adaptation, for erosion control. For example, mangroves. They are cradles for wildlife. They are where people get food and clean air. They mitigate carbon. All of this adds so much value to this measure for flood adaptation. I remember talking to one of the women from my women's network in Maranhão, and I presented her this concept of carbon sink. I said to her, mangroves are carbon sink. And she answered, no, mangroves are my body, are my body. It's what I eat, it's what I breathe. And I learned so much about her relationship with the mangroves from this answer. So what I'm advocating here is, look, we are a very new species. We are babies. We are here for 300 to 200,000 years. And the Earth is 4.54 billion years. So Pachamama, a Mãe Terra, our mother, she's wiser than us. She knows what she's doing. Let's trust her. Let's make sure that our work is helping her to work better. And my invitation today is, what if building with tomorrow in mind would become building with tomorrow in mind? Thank you.